Have you had your daily dose of fear? Or have you found the courage to step out of the front door and take a deep breath? Unless you're still living under a rock, you'll know there's a few cases of measles going around the country at the moment. And I say a few cases of measles because 60, 70 years ago when your grandparents were kids, measles was cyclical. It used to come around every 2 years. You would have seen an average of 50,000 plus cases a year. And the serological surveys showed at the time that for people born in those years, the community would have generally had around a 95% immunity rate by the age of 15. There were no wards to take up the influx of cases, no antibiotics or Pamol being dished out like candy. Very little, if any, media coverage of those affected, or those unlucky enough to have succumbed to the illness. And yes, there were deaths. Yet, here in 2019, less than 0.1 of our population has measles. And everyone's cacking their pants. Well, almost everyone. Those people you label anti-vaxxers, we're not cacking our pants. You see, for your grandparents' generation, measles was seen like chickenpox as a rite of passage illness, caught early in childhood, generally after the age of 3, and out of the way by early teens. Even in the early 70s when I was a boy, kids got measles. Mum notified the doctor, no fuss. Mum just looked after us until we counted down the days until we could go run around the neighbourhood again. Today, our Ministry of Health, IMAC, and even the World Health Organization consider your grandparents to be naturally immune to the disease. For life. One exposure, lifetime protection. And I want you to let that sink in for a minute. Anyone in this country born before 1969 is naturally protected against measles. But you and your children today are not. Why? It's a really simple answer, but that even highly intelligent people struggle to connect the dots with. You see, someone created a product to sell. A vaccine was introduced. A vaccine at the time that the world's leading microbiologists warned against. And I'll talk more about that later. But why, after 1969, is no one considered protected? Because those vaccinated have had their immune system irreversibly altered, thus altering the natural herd immunity our grandparents helped contribute to. So how has this fear come about in 2019? Marketing and an orchestrated media campaign. The number one tactic used in sales is fear. Fear of missing out. Fear it could happen to you, or worse, a loved one. You see it generally with Briscoe's, Harvey Norman. Insurance companies use fear really well in their marketing. But when it's slapping you in the face and so blindingly obvious that it's carefully planned, well executed and well-funded marketing campaign, well, you start to see through the bullshit pretty quick. And you know it's bullshit because they're only telling you what they want you to do. And you're doing it without the ability to rationally think it through. It's also designed to demonize a very tiny section of the community and portray them as the cause of the problem when they know it's not. Add to that a medical establishment feeding fear into worried parents, telling them that their children could die if they don't vaccinate. Now, we've just ticked over 1,000 confirmed cases. We're now in the Ministry of Health's perceived danger zone of 1 in 1,000, there'll be a death. And there will potentially be deaths. As with any illness, if you give it the right conditions to thrive. But there's one frighteningly obvious difference with measles in the 1960s, where the rate of mortality was closer to 1 in 11,000, and measles today in 2019. And that's a combination of the treatment method and an unhealthy, over-medicated, overfed, and undernourished society that we've become. We didn't have the rates of illness amongst children in the 60s as we do today. As a boy, I remember telethon, held for the handful of unfortunate kids with cancer. Today we have wards dedicated to them. Not to mention all the other chronic illnesses the nation's children have to deal with today. And no one's batting an eyelid at those tragic statistics. You see, making a decision to no longer vaccinate your child doesn't mean that's it. We don't leave them to roam barefoot and free and not give a toss about their health. It's actually the complete opposite. The decision does not come lightly. It comes with the greatest responsibility of being a parent and learning how to care for your child during illness. How to treat a fever, a common cold, illnesses like measles, chickenpox, whooping cough, without having to give Pamol, antibiotics, or even needing to visit your GP, just as your grandparents did, and their parents. For us, our GPs are there to back us up when required, to confirm that we're on the right path, not the first port of call for a slightly raised temp or snotty nose. I have an almost 4-year-old that hasn't seen a GP since 15 months old. A temperature of 39.5 does not frighten me. It has my full and undivided attention, and my child does not leave my sight. But it doesn't frighten me. Measles, when our daughter was 2, did not have me rushing to the doctor. Short phone call to discuss and confirm symptoms and treatment. That's all that was required. Why? Because I took the time to learn. You see, there's a treatment protocol being used at Starship Hospital, and GPs are rubbishing it when parents ask about it. But it's part of the same protocol that those anti-vaxxers use. In fact, those anti-vaxxers have known about it for decades and used it with great success when treating measles. So much success that it's actually part of theirs and their children's diets. So when the likes of measles comes around, our bodies and our children's bodies are already primed to minimize the effects and the risk of complications, because we've taken the time to learn what the disease will do if not treated correctly. Because we were prepared. The most difficult thing about measles for our daughter was keeping her inside on a warm sunny day. Have you not noticed throughout all of this outbreak, the Ministry of Health or the medical community are not offering any advice on how to prepare your child's body just in case, or even how to treat it safely if your child catches it? No, it's just vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. And if you see a doctor, it's just Pamol and antibiotics. Antibiotics for a virus? Really? Or am I just spreading misinformation? Well, let's look at some of the misinformation going around. Let's see who's really spreading it. How about this gem from New Zealand's self-proclaimed vaccine expert, Dr. Helen Petousis-Harris?
It's this vociferous vaccine deniers, this little minority that can scare people with the outrageous claims.
Yeah, what are some of the common myths that make the rounds?
The common myths recycled over the past couple of 100 years. The idea that vaccines are cocktails of toxins, monkey kidneys, aborted fetuses.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Those have been around for many decades.
I wonder what the experts have to say about it. This is Stanley Plotkin. He's known as the godfather of vaccines. He sits on numerous boards, holds a number of vaccine patents, and is the industry go-to guy. Let's hear what he had to say recently under deposition.
In your entire career, how many fetuses have you worked with?
Well, I don't remember the exact number, but quite a few when we were studying them originally before we decided to use them to make vaccines.
Okay. How about Dr. Paul Offit?
Hi, my name is Paul Offit. I'm talking to you today from the Vaccine Education Center here at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. One question that some parents are concerned about is whether or not vaccines are made using fetal cells. And the answer to that question is yes, there are a few vaccines that are made that way. Now,
wow, that from 2 internationally renowned vaccine experts. Helen, are you telling porkies to the nation? Or are you just thick? Actually, Helen, I already know the answer to that. I've read your thesis. But that's another video for another time. Or how about this from Dr. Nikki Turner, the head of the Immunisation Advisory Centre, interviewed by Radio New Zealand, telling the nation when discussing MMR coverage rates are down. Well, it turns out the rates Dr. Turner's giving is for the combined New Zealand vaccine schedule, not the individual MMR vaccine. As you can see here, MMR has been over 95% vaccination rate for nearly 15 years, not the 91% she referenced. Misinformation perhaps? Or is Helen providing those numbers? And look at the two DHB regions with the highest MMR uptake. The same two that have the largest number of cases. Oh, and look at Northland's low rates. Hasn't that happened on Dr. O'Sullivan's watch? How about earlier this year, when Dr. Turner addressed the Government Select Committee and recommended pregnant women should have the pertussis vaccine?
Specifically, they called for expert advice in the shape of Dr. Nikki Turner, Director of the Immunisation Advisory Centre and an Associate Professor at the University of Auckland.
Actually, we can immunise from probably 16 weeks pregnancy for pertussis, and newborn babies will not die. That's my soundbite.
I wonder if Dr. Turner has provided the Select Committee with the safety studies for that vaccine tested on pregnant women. She can't, because it doesn't exist. Or the women she's recommending get it are the study. I wonder what the penalty for misleading a Government Select Committee is. Someone might want to look into that. Because Dr. Turner's not acting as an advisor to the government. She's acting as a lobbyist for the pharmaceutical industry. In this case, GlaxoSmithKline. You just have to see where their funding comes from. But then, this from Dr. Turner. It's not the anti-vaxxers now, but the fault of the Ministry of Health for not running a tighter program. But we've already seen that they have been running a tight MMR program, and the government data shows it. And they know exactly what's contributing to the number of cases. But what stood out from her sudden shift in blame is that there's a whole generation they'll be lining up to vaccinate because they think they're at risk. Will they ask you to volunteer? Or is this leading to mandated vaccines? If you follow what's happening around the world, and particularly the United States, you know it's only a matter of time before they attempt it here. Wherever GSK have gained a monopoly in a country, mandates follow. Italy is a great example of that. Before I get more into the dangers of forced vaccination, I want to talk to you about when I appeared on Māori television with Dr. Lance O'Sullivan last year on the subject of forced vaccinations and no jab, no pay, or no play. It's a topic he regurgitates often, but in this interview, Lance waffled on, trying to give a history lesson with no real point or relevance to forced vaccines. Instead, here's a history lesson that does tie in with forced vaccines, and is relevant to today and the nation's health. When Europeans first arrived in New Zealand, Māori couldn't catch diphtheria, and this has been well documented. But over time this changed, and slowly Maori succumbed to it. But what caused that change? What happened to Māori to lose their natural resistance? It's the same reason Māori top our health statistics today, for all the wrong reasons. Over time, Māori began to eat and drink the white man's food and alcohol. They began to take the white man's medicine, moving rapidly away from traditional foods and rongoā. This had a detrimental effect on their health that still affects them today. You can look at any indigenous cultures anywhere in the world. Look at the time they moved away from the traditional foods and medicines and adopted another culture's ways. It hasn't gone well for any of them. Which brings me to mandates and forced vaccination. Well, the next few questions are for everyone. I would really like anyone of Māori descent to really pay attention to this. Do you feel that you have sovereignty over your body? Do you feel that as a parent, you are guardian and protector of your child's sovereignty? And have the right to decide what is injected into their bodies? Because Lance and any other arsehole like him who calls for this are wanting to take that away from you. This is the first thing you need to understand about mandates, and I hope you've heard it clearly. Forced vaccination upon any human is an assault upon their body and their sovereignty. No jab, no pay is coercion and a breach of the HDC code, amongst other things. To which Lance, a medical practitioner, is bound to by legislation. And we have that legislation because, from memory, doctors at National Women's Hospital didn't think that women needed to know they were being experimented on. Dr. Turner may want to rethink her earlier statement about the whooping cough vaccine for pregnant women. Oh, and Lance, you told us to go live in an island. We already do. One's called North, the other's called South. Genius. The second thing regarding mandates that these Muppets are screaming for, and are too ignorant to understand, is that it's not about under fives or school kids anymore. It's now about you, the adults. They're coming for you. And if you don't believe it, look at the World Health Organization and their Healthy 2030 campaign. Look at Gavi. No one left behind. Go and look at the over 200 vaccines currently in production. They're mostly for adults. So when you pave the way for child mandates in this country, you have effectively opened the door for you to be stripped of your rights and what you say can and cannot go into your body. You think that will never happen? Look into California. Started with under fives, then school age. Now there are bills being tabled to mandate adults. Land of the free my ass. You're next, and you can't even see it. That's how blinded you've become to it all. And before you know it, it's going to be too late. If you truly want to shut anti-vaxxers up for good, there's two things you need to do. The first is to ask TVNZ or TV3 why they don't do a live debate, screened at prime time between an anti-vaxxer parent and a medical professional. Who would not want to see one of those anti-vax clowns getting taken to task? Like me, humiliated on national TV for everyone to see. Why haven't they done this? Well, they have. A number of years ago, Paul Holmes did it, and a parent wiped the floor with the experts. This was around the time TVNZ recorded a program about the dangers of vaccines to air in 3 parts. Only half an hour ever made it to the screen. The Ministry of Health took TVNZ to court and blocked the rest of it from being aired. I wonder what was so damning in it that the Ministry of Health had to fight tooth and nail to stop it. I'm guessing it wasn't anything to do with the nation's health. The second way to shut them up, and probably in the argument once and for all, is to do the study of unvaccinated kids versus fully vaccinated kids. You should go to your local MP, you should demand it, and then sit there and wait for all the excuses you're going to get as to why they can't. Well, I'll tell you the reason they won't. It's because they already know. The National Immunisation Register database is linked to the National Health Index database. They already know who those are who decline vaccines. But again, they'll give you a raft of excuses as to why they can't compare them and do that study. I know a lot of parents who don't vaccinate their kids, and I guarantee every one of them will happily compare medical records with the fully vaccinated, because we already know the answer. Now our kids get sick too, but not at the rate vaccinated kids do, and certainly not with the range of illnesses they get either. As I said, I've got an almost 4-year-old, and she hasn't seen a GP since 15 months old. Can you say that of your fully vaccinated child? I'm yet to meet someone who can, and Duncan Garner seems to be reluctant to take the challenge I extended to him. The problem we have is that the vaccine's failing, let's be honest. Look at how easily measles is spreading amongst the vaccinated. We've all seen the story of the vaccinated twins who not only caught it, but passed it on to their younger sibling. We grow up being told vaccines will stop you getting it, but it doesn't. And all the experts can do is tell you to get another dose. Now you're stuck on the vaccine treadmill because your immune system is irreparably buggered. The generation that created true herd immunity are all now over 60. What happens when they leave us? Will we see Darwinism play out before us? Will it be survival of the fittest? We're not the healthiest society. In fact, we're the sickest species on the planet. And we're the only ones who willingly inject ourselves with toxins and think it creates immunity. Our medical system is beginning to crumble under the weight of lifestyle illnesses. Illnesses that are easily prevented. Cancer, diabetes, heart disease, Crohn's, it goes on and on and on. And if the medical profession can't drug it, radiate it, or cut it out of you, they have no answer. Have you not realised as the healthcare industry has grown over the past 60 years, your health has deteriorated? They're making bigger profits because you're getting sicker. When measles cases were first being reported, I laughed as to how pathetic everyone was carrying on. But as time's gone on, it's become quite sad to watch. To sit and listen to parents' conversations about it, not just to hear about the fear they choose to live in and to raise their children in, but how sad it is that we've lost the ability as a society to raise, care for and nurture our children through illness. Instead, we've been persuaded over time to give that responsibility to someone else. The doctor takes care of their health, not themselves or their family. If you want an example of that, go and sit in any medical clinic in winter. Look around the amount of people who can't manage a simple cold or infection. They run for antibiotics and Pamol at the first sign of illness. Have we lost sight of the meaning of parenting? And our medical professionals are no better at it. You go with a symptom, you get a prescription. You get a new symptom, which are the side effects of the previous medication. And you get a new drug to counter those side effects. Before you know it, you're stuck in the hamster wheel, going round and around and around. Drug after drug, symptom after symptom. I've watched it happen with countless friends and family for all kinds of illnesses. You have become a guaranteed recurring revenue source, and that is the reality you and your children face with vaccines. We're seeing overseas the recommendations to have whooping cough boosters every 3 years. At the rate we're going, you'll find it for measles as well. What would you rather have for your child? The knowledge and strength to treat a one-off illness that will give your child lifetime protection, or a lifetime stunted by continual toxic injections, with no resistance to the illness you think you're protecting them for, should they ever be exposed to it again? This comment appeared in the media yesterday by Dr. Nikki Turner. I'll let you work out what she means by it. But I encourage you to go and look into the history of the measles vaccine and how it came about. And you'll understand her comment about creating a disease. If your product requires fear, coercion, and government mandates to sell it, then maybe your product is just shit. Good luck with your vaccines, folks. You're going to need it in the years to come.